The day began like any other, a sky washed pale with the light of a reluctant sunrise, streets humming with the early commuters who didn't yet know they were living the last hours of the world they understood. And in the middle of it all walked a man named Carter, late for work and annoyed by the traffic jam that had stalled the whole block. Carter had no way of knowing that the jam wasn't caused by construction or an accident, but by a convoy of government trucks blocking the main highway, their sirens silent, their drivers wearing masks as they unloaded containment units into the drainage canals, each one hissing as something inside pounded against the walls. By the time Carter finally made it to the office, the first emergency alerts had started flashing across television screens and phone notifications, urging citizens to stay indoors, lock windows, and avoid contact with anyone exhibiting violent, flu-like symptoms. A phrase that made everyone in the break room laugh nervously until the first scream echoed from the street below. The scream turned into several, then into chaos, and by the time Carter reached the window, he saw the crowd below breaking apart as one man, pale, stumbling, his jaw slick with blood, lunged at a woman and pulled her to the ground, tearing into her throat before anyone could stop him. Panic hit like a wave, people scattering as more figures emerged from the side streets, their movements jerky, pen wrong, their mouths open in soundless moans as they threw themselves at anything living. And Carter knew then that this wasn't a riot. It wasn't a terrorist attack. It was something worse. He grabbed his jacket and ran, pushing past co-workers, taking the stairwell 3 steps at a time. And when he burst out into the alley behind the building, he nearly collided with a man whose face was covered in blood, whose teeth were broken but still snapping, and Carter shoved him aside and sprinted for his car. The city had already become unrecognizable, horns blaring, sirens wailing, people running in every direction. And as Carter drove, he saw them everywhere, biting, clawing, dragging screaming victims into the gutters. And he pressed harder on the accelerator, aiming for the outskirts where the air might be clean and the streets might be empty. News stations tried to keep up, their anchors pale and shaking as they spoke of a pathogen of unknown origins, rapid spread, unprecedented aggression, and government orders to shelter in place until further notice. But Carter had no intention of staying put. He was going to find his sister on the far side of town and get out before the whole city burned. The bridge to the suburbs was already jammed with cars by the time he got their drivers abandoning their vehicles as the infected swarmed from both ends, trapping everyone, and Carter swerved onto the sidewalk, nearly clipping a mailbox, as he made for the service road that led to the river. He found his sister, Emily, barricaded in her apartment, clutching a kitchen knife, her hands shaking as she let him inside. And together they packed what they could: canned food, water, a first aid kit, before slipping out the back stairwell and heading for the county road that would take them toward the countryside. They passed dozens of houses where doors were hanging open, where curtains fluttered in broken windows, where blood trailed down the sidewalks. And every so often a figure would stagger into view, moving too fast, too hungry, forcing Carter to swing the tire iron he'd picked up until his arms ached. By nightfall, they reached the edge of town, the skyline behind them glowing orange with fire. And they found other survivors huddled in the ruins of a gas station, too afraid to speak above a whisper, listening to the distant growls and the gunfire that cracked across the dark like fireworks. An old man told them the infection had started near the quarantine zone, that something broke containment and got into the water, that the first responders had been the first to fall, and Carter didn't want to believe it, but it made too much sense. And he tightened his grip on the tire iron and told Emily they would keep moving until they found somewhere safe. They slept in shifts, one of them always awake, because every hour brought the sound of shuffling feet outside, of something dragging across the asphalt. And twice in the night, Carter saw shadows moving between the wrecked cars, only disappearing when he raised the flashlight and pointed it directly at them. At dawn, they left the station behind, joining a convoy of other survivors heading for the hills. And for a moment, Carter let himself believe that they might make it, that they might find a farmhouse or a cabin where they could ride this thing out until help came, until the world figured out how to fight back. That hope lasted until the roadblock appeared, a tangle of abandoned vehicles and burned-out trucks. And when they stopped to clear a path, that sound of groaning rose from the forest on either side, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, moving through the underbrush with a hunger that felt endless. The convoy broke some people, running some fighting, and Carter dragged Emily toward the nearest truck, shoving her inside and gunning the engine as the first of the infected crashed through the tree line, their jaws snapping, their fingers clawing at the air. They didn't stop driving until they reached the ridge and saw the valley below. A military camp, overrun tents, burning bodies strewn in the dirt. And Carter knew then that no one was coming to save them. That, whatever this was, had spread too far, too fast, and they were on their own. He turned off the engine, looked at Emily, and told her they would keep moving, keep surviving. And when she asked him if he thought the world would ever go back to the way it was, Carter didn't lie. He told her no, that the world they knew was gone. But that didn't mean they had to die with it. As night fell on the first day, Carter climbed onto the roof of the truck, scanning the tree line with his last remaining flare. And when the infected came again, their silhouettes black against the firelit horizon, he raised the flare high and lit the night with fire. Because if this was the end of the world, he was going to make sure it ended fighting.